I was working on a production as an assistant director at a major opera house. It was my very first time seeing and working on Butterfly. For some reason, I had never seen it for most of my upbringing. Here I was working on it, and backstage, everyone who was sort of in kimonos, but they were all in Yellowface, suddenly were coming up to me, pretending to speak, you know, pidgin English, Japanese, squinting their eyes, bowing. And I was so shocked because this was a company I had worked at for many years, and these same people had never done this to me. And suddenly, because it was Butterfly and I'm half Japanese and they were dressed in that attire, this sort of mockery really felt it hit a nerve. Now, I don't think everyone was like intentionally doing it. I think some of them thought that maybe I was going to feel more welcome in the environment. I think some of them were so used to doing productions of Turandot, Butterfly, and Pearl Fishers where they were really donning exaggerated and stereotyped sort of makeup and costumes and mannerisms on stage that they thought it was like fine. They just did not really see an issue. And that was maybe, I would say, 5 years, 6 years into being on the road in opera. And that was when I was like, whoa, maybe I don't fully belong in every aspect of the art form. And that led to many kind of sobering, um, very vulnerable kind of paths or investigations about like, why am I in opera? What is it about the art form that I love? How do I fit into this world? Um, and does this opera world really want me in it?
So when you tell stories about people from other places, you can break the rules. You can tell sexy stories. You can do things like homosexuality and narcotics and suicide that you couldn't do if the story took place in our backyard. And so, as part of that rule breaking, you can also make really beautiful things. Some of the most beautiful music is Orientalist music or music from places that take place over there, fantasies. And so opera has this growing pain when it's going from being a strictly Eurocentric form to suddenly having to be a global form. What happens when, the India of some of these exotic operas like Pearl Fishers? What if it's not exotic anymore? What if that's the culture you come from or the culture your neighbor comes from?
I think there's been a real reluctance in the opera community to engage with some of the more problematic aspects of the classic operas that are set in non-white cultures. I'm still probably most well known for my play M. Butterfly, which to some extent is a critique of Madama Butterfly. I guess that anyone from the opera world who meets me or works with me probably knows that I have a problem with Madame Butterfly, and that just gets factored into our conversation. But historically, there has been this sense that, these classic works are kind of above being critiqued for content because the opera world is really just focused on, the beauty of the music and the kind of subliminal political and social messaging, which the music serves as kind of a delivery system that tends to be ignored.
So Madama Butterfly has been historically an opera that provided entry for Asian and Asian American singers. Blessing because it's job security, but curse, right? Because your career path is somehow not always fully realized. And depending on the production, many performers will feel like they are being asked to do things they don't want to do. It's also becoming an increasingly difficult issue for non-Asian singers who are very sensitive, who want the respect, who don't want to participate in this kind of a stereotypical presentation of a foreign culture.
If you look at Turandot, again, like Butterfly, if you trace all the way to the original source story, the original Turandot is a Mongolian warrior princess. She actually, like they could declare war and defend her motherland. But somehow, once the European interpreter getting in, you see like, through 400 years of whitewashing, this character just she lose all the fierce character as a warrior and become this very icy cold dragon lady. So I really want to find a way to shed light celebrating the real, like an original source story about her strength and resilience and power.
Now, Lakme is not produced very often. It's a French opera that takes place in colonial India, and of course, it's not at all accurate of reality. It is the projection of fantasy India. The role of Malika, as I was coming up, I was a mezzo soprano. That's the role I could sing, and I've done it twice. And I recall singing this in a very white company, and having experiencing a lot of ignorance about my culture. The people around me at the company were not disrespectful, but just a lot of unknowns about what it actually meant to portray this culture. I'm so glad that people are having more discussions now to dive into that before people actually try and produce those kinds of operas, so that we are a little more informed and more respectful about how we are going to produce them. Of course, in that day, people were still using makeup to color people's skin. And I recall the makeup artists at the time saying, "Oh, it's so nice. We don't have to give you any makeup to darken your skin."
I really have issue with productions of like Lakme or Pearl Fishers, where first of all, it's a white cast usually. And it's like so exoticized. And I'm like, clearly there's like nobody South Asian on this design team at all, or director. So then to like lean into that in today's time just feels like so wrong on so many levels. There's like this recording online, I won't name the singer, it's very famous recording of, Layla's aria from Pearl Fishers, and she's doing all of these like mock yoga moves during the arc. Like, this is so cringe. It's so cringe.
No. You think Yellowface, and different people have different definitions of what that is. So I think we're still at a place where really understanding what Yellowface is in the United States is not 100% there yet.
Caricatures, racial caricatures, don't build empathy. They're two-dimensional. They're flat. They're the butt of the joke. They're not in on the joke. Anytime that our way of life is threatened by you outsiders, we see a rise of caricature in our art. If it's punching up it as a Saturday Night Live spoof of the president or the queen, right? We're punching up to say, hey, we're using caricature to bring out irony, call truth to power. That's fine. But when you're punching down, it's a joke belittling women or minorities. That doesn't do us any favors. If you as an actor cannot convince me that you are a 15-year-old Japanese girl without all of that makeup, then you are not a very good actor. For me to believe that you're an Egyptian princess without that skin color on, then you are not a very good actor.
It is challenging because opera is dealing with the drama, and people have to believe the story, right? That's why I say there's an art form called makeup. Although it is also controversial. Yeah, people don't like Asian makeup and Oriental makeup and all. But I feel that this is a separate art form, like costume sets, wig, and all that exists. It should exist as its own separate, beautiful, respected art form, unless some people do it to ridicule some cultures, which I have experienced in a minor case. Like one time I was in Butterfly, my makeup artist, for some reason, wanted to make my eyes look even more Asian than I already have. So I had to tell her, well, I think I look just fine. Just leave my eyes alone. So that was a little bit of exaggeration. So unless we do something exaggerated in a negative way, I think makeup is fine.
Like I can no longer put my Asian name on what I'm presenting on stage, especially if there's yellow face, orange face, if it feels like there's cultural appropriation, I can't do it anymore. And I think that really kind of upset many people in the industry at a time where I was like the only one who was doing it, and they needed sort of my Asian name to sort of substantiate what was being presented on stage.
My thesis is that Orientalism, this fantasy imagining of Asia, has been the greatest driver of creativity and innovation in the Western performing arts. Because when you don't know what that culture over there looks like, what their music sounds like, what their customs are, what they wear, you just get to make it up. You get to project anything onto them. Any story you want to tell, you can project onto them, right? Full sex, drugs, rock and roll. So infanticide, suicide, homosexuality, incest, orgies, narcotics, all of that can take place in a porcelain pagoda or a harem, but definitely not in the palaces of Europe, because we Europeans would never do any of those things, right? So then hundreds of years later, we now have all these masterpieces on these themes with those cultures in our repertory. And you're going to those same people from those cultures and saying, Mrs. Singh, thank you so much. We want you to join our opera board and drop your kids off at our ballet school and buy a subscription. And ching chang chong, here's your culture. Sorry you're offended, but it's our tradition when we're not willing to change it. It doesn't work that way, folks. So what do we do?
And how do you negotiate? What do we do with that legacy? Do we ignore it? Do we pretend like it didn't exist? Do we do something with it? Do we highlight it? Do we correct it? And I think there's no real good answer. I don't think there's a real correct answer, except that not ignoring is not the right answer. I mean,
Yeah.
or the pretending like it didn't exist is not right answer. Acknowledging it is the first step. And how do we do that? I think what is very important is to have a conversation, study, have a conversation with the cultural, specialists, and also an honest conversation among the cast.
I'm very involved in the Japanese American community in Seattle, specifically the Japanese American Citizens League. And so it was actually my community that was preparing to protest Seattle Opera when Seattle Opera was preparing to mount Madame Butterfly. Gatekeepers at the opera gave us the green light. For me, in my seat as the person doing PR, I created a whole lobby display that went over kind of Asian American representation in Hollywood and talked about the history of Yellowface and cultural appropriation, and leaders who really saw the benefit in allowing me and other members of my community to kind of let our voices and perspectives take center stage, basically.
There's also a lot of backlash. We get a lot of people who write, not very nice things in our DMs. I actually recently just received my very first piece of physical hate mail. And it's unfortunate, that for the production that I created, we were very intentional about honoring the tradition. We wanted it to be a production that could welcome those that love the tradition as much as those that have been felt distanced by it. There are many parts of it where the staging is a traditional staging. There's cherry blossoms, there's kimonos, there's all the things. But, I intentionally said, this is not our story. We're seeing this through the fantasy of a Caucasian man. Pinkerton.
I may be in the minority, but Madama Butterfly to me is something that I believe in. I believe in the work. I believe in the possibility of the work. There's a separation between the work itself and the productions that are being put out there. And the work itself, I believe in the potential of that. There's so many crossroads that need to be fixed in Madama Butterfly, but the important thing to me is that it can be fixed.
So the flaws we can change, but changing the bad story because it doesn't work for current temperature is not right.
my experience, and the experience of audiences I know, is that if you do it well, and tell the story as Puccini wanted, to be told, it's not a pleasant story. I mean, even if you have the most, politics and feelings about, race, etc. If you can get that person to sit through a beautifully done production of Butterfly, I think they will walk away feeling such empathy for Cho-Cho-san. I think really Puccini had a lot of huge amount of feeling and empathy and love for the character of Cho-Cho-san. So, how can you walk away from that thinking, I think I'm just going to go and find somebody of Japanese descent, and just because she's just going to take it. She's okay because I saw Madama Butterfly, and she's going to be okay. And at the end, she'll just commit suicide, and then the poor boy. I mean, I can't imagine anyone of any race would hear that story, hear that music, see it, see the drama, and come away thinking that. So that's my personal feelings about that opera, that utterly exquisite opera.
And the advantage that we have as Asian Americans or Asian, we are knowledgeable of both cultures. And, for somebody like me who did grow up in Asia and in America, for me, I feel like I have the opportunity and a duty, really, kind of a responsibility to fix that. And I feel like that's a door that needs to be open for a lot of Asians, because it needs to be done correctly.
How do I tell a Japanese American story? I collaborate with them to make sure that we get it right. Not because it can ever be authentic, but because we want to tell a story with integrity. That's contemporary art. That's how to make it alive.
To me, one of the greatest weapons or greatest gifts that theaters can give is inspiration. Without telling you what it is, without speaking at you, we can just inspire you. And people can say, oh, these are actually people.